Hey SUBFURYs, today we'll be talking about something that can shatter into a million pieces, and no, it's not my dreams, it's glass, and whether or not you can bend it. It's a fascinating question because I've often wondered about the bounds of bending abilities, and the show has long been exploring how people can push the limits of what is possible when it comes to manipulating the elements. And as we've seen in the show, benders have progressively found more ways to use their bending techniques and more materials that those bending techniques apply to. Supreme Leader Mishka wants to give a special thanks to Tim Stinson, who emailed me this question. All hail Mishka, blessings be upon him. Now in the Last Airbender, Toph managed to validate her massive ego and become the first metal bender in all of history, and Hama proved that with just a little bit of skill and a sadistic mind, you can bend blood itself. Now these are all highly specialized bending skills, and in the Legend of Korra we learned about even more alternative bending materials, most notably that earthbenders can bend molten rock. Lava. But these are just ones we see discovered during the show. I've been thinking for a while about two things: why certain materials are harder to bend and why fewer benders can bend certain materials. For example, why can every waterbender bend ice while very few earthbenders are also lava benders? And I think I figured out the formula, the answer, the method by which the universe decides. So the general pattern in the lore when it comes to new bending materials is that those materials closest to those four base elements, air, water, earth, and fire, are by far the easiest to bend, and those that are furthest away from those base elements are by far the most difficult, or at least the rarest to bend. Let's take sandbending for example. It seems to be one of the oldest alternative bending styles, as in the Siwong Desert there are whole tribes of people who totally aren't the sand people from Star Wars, and they use it for all kinds of awesome stuff, like powering their vehicles, building sandcastles, and kidnapping Appa. Too soon? It's also implied that virtually every earthbender who tries to sandbend will be able to, as in we've never actually seen an earthbender who is unable to sandbend. This is unlike with lightning bending or blood bending, where it's actually pretty rare to be able to do so. I think the reason that sandbending would be one of the oldest or the easiest alternative bending styles to develop is because moving from manipulating big rocks to tiny rocks is only a small step from that original base element, earth, meaning it probably wouldn't require any new techniques or skills. Then of course we have ice bending, which every single waterbender seems to be able to do instinctively. Now yes, changing the temperature may be a little bit more complicated than just manipulating the same thing but far smaller, but I reckon that the reason that it's an extraordinarily common ability is because ice is so close to that base element, water, and they don't have to change the temperature all that much. But the key point is this: the further that a material gets from that base element, the fewer people seem to be able to manipulate it. There are comparatively few metal benders, though still plenty given that there's an entire city based around them and the Republic City police force is full of them. On a side note, should I be using less rather than fewer? Because technically speaking I don't have a countable number of metal benders. That said, hypothetically speaking, I would have a countable number of metal benders, so I'm gonna keep using fewer. I'm not a grammar Nazi. And I think the reason for this is that lightning is a bigger divergence from firebending than metal is from earthbending. When Toph first discovers earthbending, it talks about how
even metal is just a part of Earth that has been purified and refined.
very clearly, Earth is still directly involved, but when Iroh is talking about how lightning bending works with Zuko, he talks about how you have to manipulate the path of energy and control the energy both within yourself and in the world around you. There isn't really any fire or ignition directly involved. Though he was talking about lightning redirection there and not lightning generation. And now that I've got all that background stuff out of the way, I can turn to the actual question at hand today. Is glass bending possible? It's been long established in the lore that waterbenders and firebenders can control the temperature of their elemental materials, but in the Legend of Korra, we learned through Gazon and Bolin in Season 3 that earthbenders can control the temperature of their elemental material as well. On a side note, lava bending was actually already a thing in the original Last Airbender series, though we only saw it with Avatar Roku, Kyoshi, and an unnamed fire avatar, as it was a combination of firebending and earthbending.
He formed these secret passages out of the magma.
But the lava bending we discovered in Season 3 is a huge evolution in bending possibilities. Lava is on average about 1200 degrees Celsius, 2200 Fahrenheit for you heathens. So that is a big leap in temperature, as opposed to say waterbenders who only have to cool down the water that they're controlling to 0 for it to freeze. Glass, however, can only be made at 1700 degrees. That's a 500 degree difference between the hottest temperature that an earthbender can seemingly manipulate and what they would need to create glass. But it's still to be said that it's theoretically possible for an earthbender to control glass, but the massive gap in temperature may imply that glass is too far removed from that original base element, Earth. Like, in terms of how far removed it is, lava is just earth heated up like water is cooled down, while glass is stone refined to sand heated to a hotter temperature than ever bent before and then cooled again. I mean, that's a lot of change from your average.
Nice boulder.
Like, Azula's fire was blue not just because she was a special snowflake who needed to be better than everybody else, but because she was a naturally gifted prodigy who could produce extraordinarily hot flames. But that only went to 1500 degrees, and while yes, some firebenders can produce lightning, which goes to 30,000 degrees, we have to remember that firebending is all about the manipulation of heat and energy. That's kind of their whole thing. That's why Zuko looks so hot and sexy. Wait, what? Oh, the art I have seen. Count the number of times that Zuko swishes his hair and stares longingly. I mean, the sexual tension in that cave. But now we turn to one of my least favorite things in the world, hard candy. So when we meet King Boomy, we soon learn that he can bend hard candy, or at least a sweet crystalline rock called genomite. So crystal bending is definitely a thing, and it's fair enough to say that glass and crystal have at least something in common. So at first I thought that crystal bending would be a rare or restricted skill, because Boomy is a pretty damn powerful earthbender. But then I remembered that in the season 2 finale, Aang, who is by far not the best earthbender, in fact you could say he's inexperienced and even poor, he managed to bend crystals in combat with relative ease. On a molecular level though, the major difference between crystal and glass is that crystal has an ordered atomic structure while glass has a disordered atomic structure, though whether or not this even matters at all is kind of up to you. It's open to your interpretation. I think the more relevant fact to consider is that crystals are naturally occurring in the earth, while glass as we know it is man-made, though things like obsidian do exist. What is worth mentioning is that the only reason that Toph is able to bend metal is because of the natural impurities and the traces of earth. You can't bend platinum because it is a pure and refined metal. So the question becomes, is sand too refined or pure? Well, probably not. The process to create glass is actually relatively simple. Unlike purified metals which remove the trace amounts of earth that make it bendable, sand is just superheated and supercooled sand. It's mostly the same sort of thing. Yet it's also worth pointing out the obvious. Nobody has done it before! And there must be a reason for this. I mean, I have no doubt that people would have tried and experimented, and for whatever reason, it must not be as simple as sand bending because people have not done it. And who knows why? It could be the massive temperature difference required to create it, it could be that it is not naturally occurring in the earth, or it could be that it is simply too far removed from that base element, earth. This all said, just as humanity has historically pushed the limits with technology, the Avatar world is constantly pushing the limits when it comes to bending. And as they evolve, they'll discover new techniques and skills that make them better at earthbending, and I think that one day it may well be an ability that we see. Like, it's not actually clear to me that heat is a particularly important factor when it comes to bending in the Avatar world. Like, a waterbender seems to be able to control water no matter its temperature or its state. And if that's the case, then I don't really see a strong reason why an earthbender would not be able to bend earth no matter its temperature or its state. So is glass bending possible? Probably yes. It could be a skill that we will see in the future, though like all sub-bending skills, it will probably start off rare with a very few select people able to do it, and then as more people learn the technique or inherit the genes required or just have that magical X factor, more people will be able to do it. This said, talking about this sort of thing does open up a really interesting question. What are the limits of bending? Now, there's a couple of interesting scenes in the original series that talk about this, and I don't really have time to get into them today, but I'll note down to make a video about it at some point in the future, because it's a really interesting topic of lore to discuss. But that's all from me. My question for you today is, what is your favorite holiday throughout the year? Is it Easter or Christmas, World Polio Day? Let me know down in the comments below. If you're feeling generous, then I'd love for you to come support me on Patreon. It really does help, and thank you so much to those of you who are already supporting me there. It really makes this sort of thing possible and helps me to keep making videos as I live the life of a poor student. Also, feel free to come follow me on Wattpad if you'd like to read some of the stuff I write, on Facebook, on Twitter, that's where I typically talk with people that follow me, or email me stuff that you've made or whatever. The address and links in the description below. So one of the things that I have long lamented about my life is that I have very little Avatar stuff. Like, I've got this kind of cardboard poster thing, and I've got a map coming on the way. But for Christmas, I got 4 necklaces, which I absolutely adore. They have each of the 4 elements. So this one, I'm wearing my water one today, and I have fire, air, and earth as well. I know. Stop judging me. I know I'm a freaking nerd. Go on, tell me in the comments how much of a nerd I am. Maybe you don't even care about what I'm saying, but if you do, thank you. But why? Anyways, stay nerdy, SUBFURYs, and I'll see you in the future.